can't get out of first gear in St. Louis and end up falling 3-2 to the Blues in overtime. We're going to be talking about why this somewhat of a lackluster performance by the New York Rangers is not any cause for concern, and also why it was almost to be somewhat expected. Also going to be pulling some positives out of this game, namely what the Rangers were able to accomplish on the power play, going 2 for 2 and continuing their recent positive trend of really excelling in all phases of special teams, the power play, as well as the penalty kill. Also going to break down everything that happened at the end of this game and in overtime. All this and much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers. Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 801 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And I figure we might as well start by going right to the big finish. This is kind of a sleepy game, certainly the first period. The first period of this game, you know, when I'm watching these games and preparing for the podcast and everything, I always take notes, as the game progresses. And, I kind of label everything first period, second period, third period. For the first period, I probably took as few notes for that period as I have for any other period of Ranger hockey this season. There was just a whole lot of nothing. Not a whole lot happening in the first period there. A little bit of a stalemate. I guess Yaroslav Halak made a couple of saves. He made back-to-back saves with about 10 seconds remaining in the opening period, but besides that, wasn't really a whole lot of anything. Action obviously picked up a little bit in the third period, back and forth down the stretch. Rangers tying the game late and then falling in overtime. And we might as well talk about the overtime finish here. You got Kasperi Kapanen scoring just 1:16 into the OT, and I was today years old when I found out that Kapanen was a member of the St. Louis Blues. I was not aware of that. I know he's kind of bounced around a little bit and has never really lived up to the hype, but obviously got the Rangers for an overtime goal here. But you had K'Andre Miller, Artemi Panarin, and Vincent Trocheck on the ice. Miller carries the puck into the offensive zone along the boards up the left side. He has it taken away from him, and away the Blues go in the opposite direction. And credit to the Rangers, they all back-checked here. They were all hustling to get back as much as they could, but some miscommunication, or what at least seems like miscommunication, is what kind of led to their downfall here. So you've got kind of a 2-on-1, although, once again, Panarin and Trocheck both hustling to get back and trying to break up the scoring opportunity here. But the problem is, Schen's got the puck. He's on the right side. Panarin and Trocheck both go for Schenn. And so, you see this developing and you realize if Schenn is able to get his pass through some traffic here and get it over to Kapanen on the other side of the net, it's probably going to be game over because Kapanen's all by himself there and in prime scoring real estate. And that's exactly what happened. Schenn hits him with a pass, Kapanen finishes, and the Rangers lose. And once again, it felt like there might have been some miscommunication. The announcers were talking about this too. It sounded like Panarin was trying to tell Trocheck to, go get Kapanen on the other side of the net there, and Panarin was gonna, be able to catch up to Schenn and you cut him off at some point. You got two guys there. There's two forwards back, kind of scrambling to get in position and do everything they could to break up the scoring chance. It's not really their forte, and obviously they're not going to be in this position come playoff time because there is no 3-on-3 overtime in the playoffs. But just a little bit of miscommunication there led to the Rangers' downfall in the final seconds there. A little bit of a rough night for Panarin, though. He had a turnover that led to the first goal of the game, actually. It led to a breakaway for the Blues, and they scored, and they took a 1-0 lead. I know Panarin was disappointed with himself after that happened. Panarin had the puck in the attacking zone, was trying to make some moves, get around a couple of guys, and had the puck stolen, led to a breakaway, and, it is what it is. So a little bit of a tough game for Panarin, but he's played very well recently, and I look for him to have a better showing in the playoffs this year than he did last year. It's also unfortunate because this would have been a pretty nice win for the Rangers had they gotten it. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's not like this is Game 7 of a playoff series. It's not like it's the postseason in general, which is where we're going to be in about a week and a half here, all losing our minds and watching the Rangers in the playoffs. But it would have been a nice win because once it gets into overtime, you're in a situation where, okay, we haven't played our best. We haven't led a single second in this entire game, but we have a chance to win it. And it was also nice, would have been a nice win, because the Rangers tied this game very late in the third period. They tied it with 2:02 or 2:03 left on the power play with Yaroslav Halak pulled. Vincent Trocheck scored the game-tying goal in that situation there. And, obviously you're hoping that that's eventually going to lead to a win. It did not. But, again, not a crippling loss and really not even all that concerning of a loss. It hurts the Rangers a little bit in terms of potentially catching the Devils or the Canes. The Canes at this point seem pretty much out of reach, and we'll talk about the standings later. We'll do a quick standings update at the end of the episode here. The Devils, it's going to be tough to catch them too at this point. Not completely impossible, but the Rangers would probably have to go 3-0 in these last 3 games and certainly get some help from the Devils as well if the Devils lose a couple of games down the stretch here. But like I said, we're going to continue to talk about and I've kind of, touched on it briefly a couple of times here already, but I want to talk about in greater detail how the Rangers were a little bit of a step slow in this game, but why I don't really think it's all that much of a cause for concern, but also why I don't want to see it happen again this season because there's 3 regular season games left. I do expect the Rangers to be sharper in those games for a myriad of reasons, and we'll get to those in just a second. But first, we just got to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in a search, according to U.S. Indeed data. Indeed does the hard hiring work for you. Sponsor a job, and we'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description right when you post. With Indeed, you can start hiring fast. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring right now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, we just want to thank everybody for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. So the Rangers, anybody who watches this game, you could tell that this is basically the polar opposite of what we saw the night before, Rangers and Lightning. And then, of course, Rangers and Blues in this game. I mean, Rangers, Lightning, you felt like both these teams, I talked about it in our last episode, it felt like this was the last game maybe of the regular season, and both these teams needed to win this game to make the playoffs. Rangers and Lightning, that is certainly not this Rangers-Blues game. And then again, the polar opposite in this game against the Blues, it felt very much like you had a team that knew it was going to the playoffs, that would be the Rangers, and a team that knew it was not going to the playoffs, and that would be the St. Louis Blues. And even going into last night, right now for sure, and I think even going into last night, the Blues had been mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, and they're just not going to make the playoffs, and, it kind of showed. And a couple of reasons why I think it's not any cause for concern as far as why the Rangers, weren't at their best, and why I don't think it'll linger or anything like that. For starters, I already mentioned it for just a second there, but the absolute war that the Rangers had against the Tampa Bay Lightning the night before this one. You had a game that had everything. I mean, momentum swings, Rangers were up 3-0, Tampa cut it down to 3-2 and then to 4-3, so a high-scoring game, all kinds of physicality, goalies getting bumped, fights breaking out, big-time hitting. It had everything. Bunch of trash talk, everything. Everything that could happen in a hockey game happened in that game. A lot of intensity. The temperature was very high. Then you turn around and, you're playing a team with which you have next to no history in the St. Louis Blues. You go from playing in New York to playing in St. Louis, so you have to travel to play the second game of your back-to-back. And I tweeted this out last night. I think it's the only tweet I sent last night. But the Rangers playing the Blues in this game last night, I think it might have been the quietest arena that the Rangers have played in all season. And I was trying to think of some other ones. When the Rangers played at the Florida Panthers, I thought that arena was really quiet. There was a game in Winnipeg earlier this season. It was only like the second or third game of the season. And I thought that you could hear a pin drop in that arena. Couldn't really understand that. This might have been the quietest. Even like the Blue Jackets fans, they'll at least muster up enough energy to boo Artemi Panarin every now and then. But yeah, you could hear a pin drop in this arena, and so you don't have anywhere near the environment that you had the night before. You have a playoff-like environment in Madison Square Garden with the crowd going nuts, just rocking the entire night, and then you go to St. Louis here, and I understand it because, the Blues not too long ago won a Stanley Cup. Now, a lot of those key players are gone. One of them's on the Rangers, Vladimir Tarasenko, and clearly the Blues are going absolutely nowhere this season. So it's somewhat understandable, but you didn't have the background noise, certainly, that you had the night before, so nothing to feed off of there as far as the crowd is concerned. And I already mentioned this too, but, the opponent, Rangers Blues, they have next to no history. Rangers Lightning, that's a newfound kind of budding rivalry here. That'll happen when you play each other in a really intense 6-game Eastern Conference final, which is exactly what happened this season. The regular season games between the Rangers and Lightning have been intense this season. So, you go from one extreme to the other side of the spectrum, so to speak, and there's going to be a little bit of a letdown naturally. And also, I mentioned this too, but second game of a back-to-back, and you can't use that as an excuse every single time you play a back-to-back that, oh, well, we played last night, so whatever, we'll do whatever we can. No, that can't be an excuse, but I think it was at least something of a factor here. And also the fact that the Rangers got to their hotel room around 2 a.m. That's according to the announcers for the Rangers last night. So all this stuff working against them, it was basically just the perfect storm for the Rangers to essentially not have their A game. And I will cut this team a little bit of a break last night for what was something of a lackluster showing. It's not all that likely to make all that much of a difference anyway, as far as the standings are concerned. I mean, if the Rangers finish, I was going to say 1 point behind the Devils, but really, it's more like if the Rangers finish tied with the Devils, we might look at this 1 point that they lost here as, the difference maker. The Rangers are going to have to finish 1 point ahead of the Devils if they want to get home ice advantage against them in the first round. And more on that in a little bit here. But again, the fact that they lost this game in overtime and only got 1 point instead of 2, very, very unlikely to make really any difference come Stanley Cup playoff time. But I will say, I think this is the last time that this should happen because, listen, over the course of 82 games, it's hard to be sharp as a tack every single night. There's going to be a couple lackluster performances mixed in there every now and then. The key is just limiting them, and I think the Rangers, if you look past that rough stretch they had in the fall, I think they've mostly done that this season. But now, you're down to just 3 games remaining. On Saturday, you're at the Jackets. Monday, you're at home against the Sabres, and then Thursday at home against the Leafs. I'm not saying the Rangers have to treat this like it's games 5, 6, and 7 of a playoff series, but they should look a lot sharper in those games than they did in this one here last night. You want to be feeling good and getting close to that, style, that energy that you're going to have to bring night in and night out once the playoffs start. So we'll look for better performances for the Rangers, and that begins on Saturday, once again against the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Rangers already lost to the Jackets once this year, so let's not let it happen again. Let's go out there, take care of business, and get things pointed back in the right direction. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. There was one big-time positive coming out of this game that I wanted to talk about, and that was, of course, the Rangers going 2 for 2 on the power play, the resurgent New York Ranger power play. I think for a while we were all looking for more out of that unit or those units, however you want to look at it, and we're starting to see that over this last handful of games here. So that's obviously very encouraging, and we'll break down everything that the Rangers did on the power play. We'll do that in just a second, but first, we got to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything, from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, once again, we want to thank everybody for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. And to keep everything rolling here, we're going to talk about the Ranger power play. Once again, they go 2 for 2 on the power play in this game, while the Blues go 0 for 1. It just wasn't like a very physical game or a very chippy game. There was next to nothing as far as extracurriculars are concerned. And when that's the case, oftentimes there's fewer penalties taken as well. Just not really a high-intensity game. But the Rangers, like I said, they scored on both of their power plays. That's very, very encouraging moving forward here. You had a situation where Heel drew a power play. He actually was tripped up by Pavel Buchnevich, former New York Ranger, of course. And the Rangers going into this game, very encouraging stat that they mentioned on the broadcast. They'd scored at least one power play goal in 4 of their last 5 games. So now you can make it 5 out of their last 6 games where they have 1 or more power play goals. So they're converting on their chances here at a much higher clip than they were even a short time ago, even as recently as, say, 2 weeks ago or whatever it might have been, however long ago it was. But yeah, Mika Zibanejad on the first power play making a pass to Chris Kreider. Kreider is unable to get a shot away, but it goes right to Vladimir Tarasenko, and Tarasenko does not hesitate. He shoots into what was a pretty open net there, and he scores, and he ties the game at 1-1 for the New York Rangers. And while we're talking about Tarasenko, I might as well also talk about how, I thought the Blues were very good to him, as well as Nico Mikkola, both coming back to St. Louis. In the first period, they, gave a little bit of a tribute to Nico Mikkola. Vladimir Tarasenko later, they went nuts for Tarasenko. It's probably the loudest that they were all night, and Tarasenko looked like he was, pretty emotional from that. It's funny because Micheletti was mentioning that he had talked to Tarasenko earlier in the day, and I guess Tarasenko wasn't sure how they would react to him, and Joe was telling him, dude, come on, you won a Stanley Cup here. And yeah, sometimes I think these players, they overthink things, and the idea that, these St. Louis fans would boo Tarasenko after he played for so many seasons there, obviously was a tremendous player, and most notably, and what we already mentioned, won a Stanley Cup there as a member of the Blues. The idea that he would get booed is just insane to me, but he looked like he was very touched from it, nevertheless. And then, to keep everything going here and keep our focus on the Ranger power play, or get our focus back to the Ranger power play, you got Vincent Trocheck tying the game at 2-2. This happened with just 2 minutes and 2 seconds remaining in the third period. The Rangers got a power play, and they decide to pull the goalie, and they're able to, convert here. So Trocheck wins the faceoff, and he's at about 56% as far as faceoff winning percentage is concerned this season. So that's awesome, and that's going to be huge come playoff time. Faceoff has not been a strong suit for the Rangers, and it's nice to have somebody that can go out there, dominate on the dot, and somebody that you just feel he can win a faceoff for us in a big spot when we absolutely need to win a faceoff, and that's what Trocheck seems to do. And I don't know if there's any way to mention this, but it feels like Trocheck, he's clutch when it comes to faceoffs. When there's a situation late in the game, Rangers are up by a goal, Rangers are down by a goal, they really need to win a faceoff. It feels like those are the ones that he tends to get for this team. He doesn't lose a lot of those in those clutch spots. But the Rangers went to work here. You got Fox playing the puck behind the boards, behind the net. Tarasenko's back there. Tarasenko passes back up the boards to Panarin. Panarin back to Fox at the blue line, Fox back to Panarin, and then Panarin with a really quick pass down low to Vladimir Tarasenko. Tarasenko is kind of along the goal line there. Tarasenko immediately passes to the front of the net, the slot area there. Trocheck is there, and Trocheck, great play here, stopped the puck with his skate, played it with his stick, and shot it right away and scored, and that tied the game at 2-2 and set the stage for overtime, where unfortunately the Rangers lost. But it was nice to see them score a clutch goal down here, down the stretch. Needing a goal on the power play with the goalie pulled, coming through in a big spot there. And once again, nice to see the power play doing well here. And really, when you look collectively at the power play and the penalty kill right now, collectively, all together, I think this is the best that the Rangers special teams once again have played all season. They're both hot lately, and no better time than right now going into the playoffs to have both those units firing on all cylinders. And I feel like that's what we've been getting recently. Wanted to talk about one other thing here before we pretty much call it a day. Goalie distribution for the Rangers for these last 3 games here. We already talked about the schedule that the Rangers are facing. I'm thinking for these final 3 games, you go Igor in the next game, and I got the schedule right here. So Igor at Columbus, then give me Halak at home against Buffalo, then give me Igor at home against Toronto. And again, at Columbus is Saturday, home against Buffalo is Monday, home against Toronto is Thursday. And the reason that I think it makes sense to do it this way, there's no reason for Igor to play all 3 at this point, I don't think, unless you really want to try to pass the Devils and try to get home ice advantage and, just step on the gas to try to do that. But the reason I think this makes sense is assuming that you're not hell-bent on catching the Devils. You wouldn't want Igor to play all three of these games, but I think you do want Igor to play the final regular season game, which I wouldn't always say, but when you look at the way the schedule lines up right now, the Rangers' regular season finale is this upcoming Thursday at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then the playoffs don't start until Monday, April 17th. And we don't even know for sure if the Rangers are going to play on that day. They'll either play on the 17th or the next day, the 18th. So if you don't play Igor in that game, the regular season finale, then presumably he would play the second to last game at home against Buffalo. That's happening on Monday, April 10th. So Igor then would go a week or like 8 days without playing a game, and I think that's a little too long. I mean, I understand you want him rested and you want him feeling good for the playoffs, but I don't want that much time between Igor Shesterkin starts, especially when it has to do with going from the regular season into the postseason. Those are just my thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, I think the Rangers are just about ready for the playoffs, and I think we're just about ready too. I know this is a little bit of a lackluster showing in this game here, but again, for all the reasons we talked about, it was not to be unexpected, and once again, I don't think it's any cause for alarm whatsoever. I figure we could pretty much call it there. One last thing that I want to mention, kind of random here at the end of today's episode, but it's something that I saw somebody post about on Twitter. Somebody asked the question, there were a lot of comments left on this Twitter post here. Is Chris Kreider, when it's all said and done, does Chris Kreider get his number, lifted into the Madison Square Garden rafters? And it's something that, has kind of popped into my head from time to time. My thoughts on this is that if the Rangers win a Stanley Cup while Chris Kreider is still on this team, no matter how old he is, no matter how big of a role he has or how small of a role he has, and you got to figure if the Rangers win a cup, Kreider's going to have a big role. But if he's on any roster for the New York Rangers that wins a Stanley Cup, 100% yes. That jersey lifted up into the rafters can't happen soon enough after he retires. If the Rangers do not win a cup, I think he probably still gets there. I mean, when I realize that there's people that will say that, like, when somebody's on the same team for a long time and you start to climb all these records and get near the top, oh, well, he's an accumulator. Well, what's wrong with that? Chris Kreider chose to stay a New York Ranger, chose to ride it out through this rebuild, and he's now been a part of two completely different eras of New York Ranger hockey where the Rangers have had a heck of a team. And like I said, when you start getting into top 10, top 5, top 3 all time in stats like points and goals and games played, I think that counts for something. And I think even without a Stanley Cup, I would lean toward Kreider having his number, lifted into the rafters there. And I don't want to make it too easy for somebody to get that honor, because I do think it should be a pretty exclusive club. And it's one of those things where I don't think he can let everybody in there, but I think even without a cup, Kreider probably should be there, especially when you consider where his numbers are going to be whenever he does decide to hang him up and, retire, which is many years into the future, you would have to think. I think Kreider right now is only 31, so he's got a lot of good hockey left in him. And like I said, if they win a Stanley Cup, it's a slam dunk for me. His jersey goes up there for sure. But that's something we'll discuss in the future in maybe an off-season episode. I think maybe what I'll do, we'll talk about Kreider in greater detail, and I think maybe we'll take a look at some current Rangers and guys who, years and years and years down the road after they've retired and hopefully had long, prosperous careers with the Rangers, if those guys can end up, having their jersey also retired. Well, that's an off-season episode. That has off-season written all over it, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.